You were told you overthink. You were told you're too sensitive, too intense, too much in your own head, and somewhere along the way, you believed it. That belief is the most expensive lie you've ever accepted. What's up, guys? Here's what this video is actually about. The way most people experience isolation, exhaustion after social situations, and the constant sense of being slightly out of place, those aren't signs of anxiety or social dysfunction. They are symptoms of a mind processing the world at a depth the people around them can't track. And the reason you never got that framing? Because the system around you needed you not to have it. Let me show you what I mean. Kazimierz Dabrowski, a Polish psychiatrist who spent decades studying intensely gifted individuals, identified what he called overexcitability. Not a disorder, not a diagnosis to be managed. A signature of specific minds that process intellectual, emotional, and sensory data at significantly higher intensity than average. His research, largely ignored in mainstream psychology for most of the 20th century, described these minds not as outliers who needed correction, but as the raw material of what he called advanced human development. Dabrowski wasn't working on the fringe. He was building a theory about why the people most likely to change their environment are also the people most likely to be crushed by it first. That friction you feel in rooms where nothing is technically wrong, that quiet fatigue after conversations everyone else found easy. Dabrowski had a clinical name for it. You've just been calling it a personality flaw. But here's the part nobody talks about. Carl Jung spent 50 years mapping the architecture of the human psyche. He described a phenomenon he called participation mystique, a state in which a person is so fused with the beliefs, emotions, and reactions of their social group that they cannot distinguish their own inner life from the inherited atmosphere around them. They feel what the tribe feels. They're offended by what the tribe is offended by. They haven't developed a separate self. They are, in Jung's framing, a node in a network rather than a sovereign individual. Most people live there. That is not judgment. It is observation. Now consider what happens when someone who has begun to step outside that collective field, even slightly, walks into a room full of participation mystique minds. Your silence reads as judgment. Your questions read as aggression. Your refusal to perform the expected social rituals reads as arrogance. You haven't done anything. You've simply failed to dissolve into the shared trance. And the unconscious social system responds to that failure the way it always has, with subtle exclusion, low friction, and quiet pressure to get back in line. This is why you've spent years sensing hostility you couldn't explain. You were perceiving accurately. The collective was registering a signal it couldn't place and responding to it the only way it knows how. Jung himself paid that exact price. When his intellectual framework diverged from the dominant orthodoxy of his era, he was professionally isolated and personally abandoned by colleagues who had once called him a successor. He documented what followed as one of the most significant psychological crises of his life. He called his way through it individuation, the slow, often brutal process of separating the sovereign self from the inherited collective identity. He emerged not broken, but clarified. The lesson he left behind was permanent. The price of genuine perception is temporary solitude. The reward for surviving that solitude is an identity no one can take from you. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. The exhaustion you've been carrying is not the cost of being broken. It's the cost of running a cognitive process that no one around you can see. Research in cognitive psychology, including work explored through the lens of what some scholars call high cognitive load processing, suggests that minds wired for deep pattern recognition are simultaneously managing multiple interpretive layers during any social interaction. Surface content, emotional subtext, historical pattern of the speaker, inconsistency between this conversation and one from 6 weeks ago, possible motive behind a single sentence. You are not running one process. You are running several, simultaneously in real time, behind a neutral face. Of course you go home exhausted. You've been treating a racing engine like it's broken because it doesn't idle quietly. Niccolo Machiavelli, writing not as a villain, but as a strategist in a world where political survival required precise reading of human behavior, described a dual intelligence in a way most people misread entirely. He wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." What Machiavelli was pointing at underneath the animal metaphor was sequencing. Observation first, action second. The fox sees the structure of the situation before committing to it. That is exactly what your mind does in every room it enters. The reason it has felt like a liability is that you were never taught what it was for. Most people stop here. Don't, because the practical shift is not about becoming colder or more calculating. It's about redirecting a faculty that has been running without a frame. The mind that overprocesses social interactions doesn't need to stop processing. It needs a container for what it observes. Strategic silence, perceiving without narrating, is where this starts. When you see clearly in a room, the instinct is to share it, to test whether others see what you see. That instinct is expensive. Perception that is spoken becomes information about you. Perception that is filed becomes leverage. Alongside that, what some researchers in relational psychology loosely describe as asymmetric depth, the idea that not every person in your life requires or can handle the same level of access to your internal world, is not emotional withholding. It's accurate resource allocation. Your depth is not unlimited. You don't owe the surface tier of your life the same energy you'd give someone capable of matching it. And deliberate solitude, not the accidental kind you've been suffering through, but structured, intentional withdrawal, is not a symptom of the problem. It is part of the architecture. Every philosopher, every strategist, every figure in the documented history of deep psychology built it in intentionally, not because they were antisocial, because the mind that absorbs that much data from the world needs uninterrupted time to process what it gathered. When someone tells you that you spend too much time alone, you are now equipped to recognize that statement for exactly what it is. Here's why this matters right now. We are living inside the loudest information environment in human history. The premium on quiet observation has never been higher. The ability to read what is actually happening beneath the noise, beneath the performance, beneath the stated motive, is increasingly rare precisely because the environment selects against it. The minds that have always struggled to go along to get along are the exact minds the current moment needs operating at full capacity, not apologizing for the way they're wired. You came into this video carrying a version of the question, "Is something wrong with me?" You can put that question down. It was always the wrong question. The right question is, what do you do with a mind like this now that you understand what it is? That's what this channel is for. If this landed differently than what you usually watch, subscribe to Vertex Vision. This is where the work continues. Drop the words "sovereign observer" in the comments. Not as a slogan, as a marker for yourself that the old framing ends here. Like the video if you want the algorithm to keep putting this kind of content in front of people who need it. The next one goes deeper. I'll see you there.